everyone, and welcome to the Propcast. My name is Louisa Dickens, co-founder of Ella Mulry and board director of the UKPA, and I shall be your weekly host. Each week for 30 minutes, we'll be connecting the VCs, prop tech startups, and real estate professionals globally, and assist in bridging that famous communication gap we all love talking about. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Propcast. In today's show, we are focusing on build-to-rent space and specifically looking at tech-enabled build-to-rent. And I thought, who better to join me other than Rajesh, who is Executive Commercial Director of Quintain's build-to-rent business. So, and welcome, Rajesh.
Thank you very much, Louisa. Looking forward to this.
Awesome. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. For those who are listening, Rajesh is responsible for all aspects of the TP business development, including new sites, products and services together with all the finance and commercial activities in order to position TP to become the UK's largest build-to-rent platform. Now, he also leads on the design and pricing for future plots of Wembley and new business. Rajesh joined Quintain in 2008 as the transactions director, responsible for refinancing, acquisitions, disposals, and joint ventures. Rajesh has worked in real estate for over 20 years across a range of sectors, including commercial, residential, and retail. And prior to Quintain, Rajesh spent 10 years at the well-known land securities business, where he was investment strategy director at its Trillium subsidiary. He led the pricing of Trillium's new business transactions, as well as portfolio management of existing assets. And prior to that, he also worked at PwC as a management consultant. Now, let's also talk a little bit about, Quintain, to give a sort of brief summary, because it's a pretty impressive site. Quintain is behind 85-acre Wembley Park, and it's one of largest, most exciting new neighbourhoods. And once complete, we'll have, I think, over nearly something like, is it 8,500 homes, Rajesh? Is that it?
Yeah, very difficult to count precisely. That's a good number, yes.
And Quintain is also the third largest residential developer in Ireland, with over 9,000 homes in the pipeline across 460 acres of prime development land. Now, the company's going for 27 years, and the team has transformed assets into places where people want to live. You know, companies want to grow, and they're really sort of bringing neighborhoods alive, which, you know, creating sort of communities, which I think that's what a lot of us are all sort of seeking. It's this new concept of living. And going from that, you know, Jess, I love to sort of hear a little bit more about, how did Quintain, which I sort of see and a lot of people see as like a pioneer build-to-rent into the UK, like, how did it come about initially?
Thank you, Louisa, for the introduction. So I've been at Quintain for 12 years now, and the history starts all the way back in 2008. So in the old world, we were developing some residential. We had 250 private units, which completed in 2008 to 2010. And in those days, most of them were sold to private investors who put down a 10% deposit off plan. When the last big financial crisis came in 2008 to 10, unsurprisingly, with the property values having fallen massively, most of these investors handed back the keys to us, foregoing their 10% deposit. And then we left with a big dilemma at Quintain. Do we either flog those 250 apartments very cheaply into the market or recoup some money back?
Yeah.
Or alternatively, the route we took was, why don't we start operating these ourselves? And that's really the start of our journey. So we then hired a couple of people, set up an in-house business, and then on our own books, started leasing these, operating these, managing these. And to a bit of surprise to us initially, but in hindsight not, these let up very quickly. And if you follow the history of those over the next 2, 3, 4 years, we're getting consistent rental growth, we're getting occupancy at 98.5%, and is a very strong, robust business. And one of the things we learned early days is the very strong focus on customers, be it the landlords at that point when we slowly sold the apartments, or ultimately the customers who lived with us. So over the next 4 or 5 years, we sold these down, but we still retained letting and management responsibility on behalf of people who bought these, mainly again investors as well. But because of that, when it came to about 2014 and 15, we said, let's start with the markets improving the rest of our resi development. And per the old Quintain history, we would have bought and sold like many housing developers. But we said, actually, with that knowledge and experience sitting in-house, why don't we look at retaining some of these buildings as build to rent on our own books? And with the board being convinced that's the right strategy to do, I spent probably 12 months heavily researching, taking the foundation we had within Quintain, but looking very, very hard at what the customers really want as renters at large in London and beyond, what the pain points were. And throughout 2014 and 15, a ton of research took place, looked at process, our brand, the customer proposition, systems and software, and therein came the sort of TP. So the first building opened in 2016, and one of my proudest moments is the whole lead up and opening of sort of TP in 2016, and thereafter it's been growing massively ever since.
Yeah, I remember when I first saw the branding on the tube. I was actually on a webinar and we were talking about the difference in sort of branding of within the build to rent space and I guess more sort of traditional estates and developers, and it's just a whole new level. It's really impressive. Was there so obviously if we're looking at sort of choosing to invest in sort of build to rent, you obviously did a lot of sort of market research. Was it sort of following on from obviously the growth in the sort of US? Was there anything sort of, I guess, delving into a little bit more why specifically build to rent for you?
So number of reasons. First was a part of Quintain most people don't realize, but we've got a long history in customer-led real estate businesses. So to give you the best example we have is a student business called IQ, which we set up as Quintain way back in the day. We managed the whole thing and we grew it to about 3,500 units before we sold it on. But we've done the same in other sectors such as science parks, care homes as well. So there's a long history about operations. The example I gave you earlier about own residential management experience from 2008 onwards equally gave us the confidence to do it. But the ultimate driver really is, if you take a step back, what you learn from the US is, residential in the long term, they've got 30, 35 years of history there, is long-term, stable, growing income streams. And from our perspective, our investors' perspective, that gave us a very strong, I guess, economic driver to invest within this. But at the same time, what we want to make sure we stand uniquely for is the whole very strength and depth in customer service.
Yeah.
See, those elements come together, help us get there. And what we also had at the same time is an investor in our own in Lone Star, who saw this as an opportunity to grow very rapidly a scale build-to-rent business in a single site in the UK in London. And if it wasn't for Lone Star, we would have been, as a listed company on our own balance sheet, going very, very slowly along the journey. Was if you stand and look at Wembley Park today, from when Lone Star bought us in 2015 to what exists today, it's a tremendous transformation of a site, which many people still remember in the old sort of stadium-related event days.
It's entirely different. It's so impressive. For those who are listening and are based in the UK, it's definitely worth taking a trip to have it's almost just have a look around it, or maybe even rent it. Who knows? We've seen obviously a huge, whether it's just obviously more players coming into the build to rent space, whether it's US players, coming into the UK, traditional developers looking at a sort of build to rent investment, or even, I guess, a European investment developer coming to the UK. What do you think? What are sort of the couple main reasons why build to rent has really sort of grown in the UK and will probably continue to grow?
So I mentioned US a couple of times where it's been established for a long time, but what many people don't realize is if you look at Europe, if you look at Germany, France, Netherlands, large-scale rental has been existing for a long time there as well. As somehow UK has been in a unique, isolated case where it hasn't. And a link to that is our long-standing desire to have home ownership as individuals, and that's why it's never cottoned on. But when the big downturn came in 2008 to 10, where institutions previously had sat shy of that, the whole point about what I said earlier about long-term stable growing income streams, suddenly they wanted a piece of the action because many other parts of the market weren't delivering those. So there was that supply piece where the investment money was now suddenly wanting to find a home, and then developers were responding to it. But the flip side is really on the demand side from our customers, and part of the research I did in the UK is consistently littered with stories of very, very poor landlord, customer service, badly managed properties, maintenance not taken care of. So you had both parts, supply and demand, acting together, and it had all the right ingredients, and it was the right time in the economic cycles for all those bits to come together. Hence why from 2014 to 16 onwards, a lot of new startups in the build rent sector started coming together.
Do you think, I guess, when it comes down to tenants or just the everyday man or woman, do you think, I feel like everything's so accessible, whether it's through tech or just an app we sort of use, we all sort of have everything at the touch of a tip. You know, we want good customer service. We want to know when we can book our yoga class, when we can have, I don't know, whatever it could be, restaurant. Is this sort of what the build rent site is trying to sort of create, make everything a lot sort of easier, you know, easier, like a more sort of efficient, just sort of a nicer sort of environment to sort of be in?
Absolutely, and part of the research, as I said before, is a very poor customer experience in the UK. So part of it is exactly what you said, is, you know, the sector is there to provide a very stable, strong base level of customer service. You make sure the buildings are operated really well, you know, maintenance queries are taken care of, you know, the place is clean, amenities are provided, there's an events program. So there's a strong core base, and then various different operators decide whatever top-ups they want on top of that to make their proposition as unique as possible. So where I guess we want to go is just go down that journey. But from the success point of view, if you are a customer living in any of the build-to-rent operators' buildings, success would be really that, you know, once you ever had to move for whatever personal and other sort of business reasons, you'd be hard pushed to go back to the traditional PRS sector for the reason I explained earlier. And that's really the base level property you want to get to. People feel very comfortable, and that's the minimum they desire and want to live in going forwards.
Yeah, and I guess it's also, as an investor, developer, or site sort of owner, you want to really maintain that level of customer service, and I guess continue to sort of build on it, because if the market's getting slightly more saturated or more competitive, you want to keep these tenants as well. And I guess, yeah, they're drawn to certain things. Like I was on I've gone to Whale Life sites and say Granger sites as well, and also your site. It's just, you walk in and it's just, even the sofas or just the walls and how everything's designed, it's just on another level. Is there, if I'm comparing, say, the UK to build rent to US multifamily, is it at a similar sort of level of design? Do we have more to learn from the US, or is it, can you sort of not compare them?
I think you can compare. I've done a number of trips myself to the US. If you're talking about similarities first, the very strong ethos in the US is the customer at the heart in everything they do. Just the way they look after them, how the building's been designed is really thinking about how the customer lives. So that's one of the things, you know, most of the peers in the build rent sector in the UK are going down a similar journey. I remember my first trip to the US in 2014 or 15, can't remember. Every building I went to is like in an amenity heaven. You know, there's so much choice to bring forward. And we used to call it the amenities arms race. And again, you're finding in the UK, everyone in their own unique way. And we're trying to do something like that in every building at Wembley, has a different look and feel, and, you know, amenity provision, just bring that choice to the customer. And really about how they train their staff, and the staff then deliver the customer service. All of those things, I think they're quite similar to the way UK build rent is growing. Where the differences come, I think the most obvious one is scale, where the biggest operators in the UK, ourselves included, will have, you know, a couple of thousand units at the moment and growing. In the US, you know, that would be considered quite small. You know, tens of thousands is what most people talk about. If you go to people like Greystar, I think they have 500,000 plus apartments under the management. So that's one of the big differences out there. Where it comes to the specifics of design, in a way, about how things are finished off, you know, to the flooring and the walls and so on, I think where I've seen a difference is actually in the UK, and whether it's cultural or mindset, there's a lot more care and attention brought to that aspect of a building. And one of the questions I hear a lot is, are we, you know, possibly overthinking this in the UK? Whereas, you know, our customers are, you know, are they really noticing their very precise level of detail, or are they really after a very homely feel, good furniture, good service? You know, what are the priorities from a customer? And then the other sort of maybe cultural differences, like, you know, in the US, you often hear about big laundry provisions in the basement, even though I heard more recently there's a move towards in-apartment laundry. COVID has been a driver. Air conditioning is the other factor as well. But there's a lot of little nuances, but on the whole, the biggest difference, I think, is scale. And we have, and in fact, in the US have been running for a long time as well. So we have a long way to catch up and get to that level with the US.
And if we're, so for the US, I've been looking at, the people who sort of work on those sites or even visiting them personally from doing a little bit of research on, say, LMRE living side. When it comes down to, the people working there, it seems like a lot more of them come from, they've all worked in hospitality or sort of restaurant. Now, over here, just what I've seen from a hiring perspective on, say, if we're looking at the operational side, a lot of people at first came from sort of residential, but now I'm seeing obviously people, there's a movement of people from other industries, hospitality, retail, and all of a sudden it's a lot more sort of sexier, where I think straight hospitality, it seemed like a slightly more glamorous area to be in rather than sort of residential. Have you seen sort of much of a change in the past few years of, or even for, I guess, you personally, of the people you've hired for Wembley?
Definitely so, because early days, most of the people coming to the sector were from a more traditional real estate management businesses. But over the last three or 4 years, we've deliberately gone for hospitality in its broadest sense. But rather than sector specific, what we've been testing very heavily in our recruitment is mindset. Yeah. Are people really willing to go the extra mile? Are people really willing to put themselves into the customer's shoes, willing to take every problem to its resolution? If you get the mindset, and that is not just in a front-facing, client-facing roles, all the way back to any back office function, whether it's marketing or finance, that mentality means, as a team as a whole, the TP team, you're all strong and all driving for the same end goal. That's been the biggest difference. And I think slowly, and organizers such as UKAA are playing a role, slowly and surely, the whole career opportunity within the build-to-rent sector is coming out to the fore, and people are willing to jump sectors to come and work in this sector, whatever the role or the job opportunity may be.
Yeah, I think also just working, from what I gather, if you work, not only if you're a tenant and live on, say, Wembley Park, there's a community there. After speaking to the community or leasing managers, people are also attracted to working those sites because it's like a family. I mean, if everyone's sort of striving to make the place, a nice environment or good customer service, it's surely quite a nice job to have. It should be quite a nice place to work rather than, your traditional, restaurant job or, say, working in like an office. So I can completely see a lot of draw factors in sort of whether it's culture, environment, day to day, which is also, I swear, if you're working in build to rent, it's no longer a traditional property management or leasing job. It's a whole 360 job where you are wearing many hats. So I think to a lot of people it would be quite attractive because you're permanently sort of upskilling yourself.
Absolutely. And I guess two things come in play. So from our perspective, being owner, developer, and operator, there's amazing synergies across the business. So what we found, and it's taken a while to get there, is if you are in the development business, looking at next resi opportunity at Wembley or elsewhere, every piece of thinking going on, culturally now is really about what it means to you living there. Are we designing it for fit for purpose, from where you position, concierge and lifts and apartment layouts all the way to bin stores and the like. So that cultural shift is much different to old days, 5-6 years ago, Quintain, where, and any other housing developer, where you were building more to get a quickest capital gain from a sale. Whereas now, as we are developing and operating, very, very important to us, materials we choose, how that will last in the long term. So that's been a big change to us going forwards.
And I guess if you're also working out how to sort of connect with your tenants or just the people on the site and making it a better customer experience, tech is one way of making our lives easier. I mean, it's not perfect yet, but that's a good start. And I'm sort of seeing more tech being put into all sorts of sort of sites. But if we're looking specifically at, I guess, Wembley, how has prop tech affected it over the past sort of few years?
So early days, so when set up TP, the most important thing to us was get our basic operations sort of stabilized as quickly as possible. And right from the early days when I set up TP, I was getting, new startups in the UK, prop tech, fintech, tech broadly, coming talk to us all the time. And I'm personally a sucker for new tech ideas all the time. So I'm always willing to give all these people an ear, because there's within them always a gem you want to work with. But our priorities in those days were really stabilizing. As time has gone by, we slowly introduced more and more. And the biggest, I guess, acceleration from us was last year, where we set up an in-house sort of tech smart cities initiative group where we meet as a team across all of Quintain, operation, development, finance, everyone. And not only do we look at how tech can help us holistically, not just in the residential piece, also we're inviting people from the prop tech, fintech industry come in and present new ideas to us. Loads of people came and pitched, and as I said, I fell in love with virtually all of them. The challenge we had was never having had a sort of in-house focused tech team to take these forwards and deliver against them. And that's where we turned a corner back in the last year. We've hired an interim CTO. We got a set of core permanent people within that and loads of contractors. And now I think within the last 9 to 12 months, we've seen a massive acceleration on use of tech across the piece from every aspect of the customer journey. I can go through all these in more detail in a minute, to the way we operate buildings and our customers, to the way the buildings themselves are managed, and actually even going further back in time to the way we are constructing in the first place. And that finally means actually we are, rather than just listening eagerly like I was to people coming pitch, actually deciding the other way around, what is that we need to keep growing as a business? What is that we need to keep doing to make our customers' lives better? And then go and find the right tech which fits that mold.
It must be quite hard to find the right tech because a lot of products are still sort of being developed. There's a few good case studies out there. Have you got any sort of success stories of any products you're using currently?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. Referencing. So there are many, many companies out there who provide sort of digital online referencing services with sort of soft banking needs, so you can get your credit rating checked online, etc. To us, what was really important was speed. It was really important that it was accurately done and consistently and fairly done. So we went out on a tender process to find many people. So prior to that, just as a segue, we were using the more traditional manual process referencing, which was taking anything up to 2 weeks. In this sector growing as quickly, that just isn't good enough. We want something which has been done in minutes. So long story short, we picked a company called Home People who needed a bit of configuration, but they work very well with us and actually is a great success story for us. It's made not only a customer's life very easy, but from our own leasing team, actually, rather than having to chase for more information on a regular basis, rather than having to chase their old referencing company to make sure they are on track to deliver us the output, actually is done literally in a matter of minutes, and the control then sits with the customer rather than with us.
Yeah, I guess also if you have sites with thousands of people on it, the last thing you want to do is chase those references. My first job was a lettings negotiator at Foxtons, and I absolutely hated that part of the job. And no one makes any money when we can't get the referencing back. So I guess we've spoken quite a bit about the positives of technology. Are there any sort of negatives you see in it?
So one of the things, if I go on the journey I said to you before about people coming to pitch to us, one of the things we've learned very quickly, and it's kind of a lesson for this conversation, is about being very, very clear in our minds what we want, what the business need is, what's the customer driver, economic driver. Try and write it down in a very clear brief, and actually then you're much better suited to find the right person and make sure you get the right sort of modification in the software or the terms and condition and use of the software coming your way. So one of the downsides is when you rush into things, tech can actually end up being a lot more expensive than the initial pitch ever tells you it's going to be, and it can take a long time to get it fit for purpose for you. So the lesson there is, by not thinking hard up front, actually you end up spending a lot of time and effort and money and not necessarily getting the right product for you. And what ends up happening is a lot of frustration all the way through the journey. So that's one of the biggest lessons we've taken away. And having that dedicated team in-house who brings that discipline your way. Because honestly, as a business, whether it's Quintain or TPU, any parts of us, we are all very eager bunnies. We always want to do better and differently and want to keep forging ahead. We need that discipline in-house to make sure you're making the decisions as best as well as you can.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of companies actually hiring for CTOs now as everyone's trying to work out exactly what tech they sort of need in their assets just across the board, no matter what space you're sort of in, especially since COVID, and I guess increasing what tenants are now after. But I guess on that topic, is there any sort of product that you're looking for in the market? Is there something which tenants are like crying out for sort of post-COVID, or is there a certain amenity which they're now looking for?
Yeah, I mean, so COVID, for obvious reasons, has driven, most people to work at home. And that in itself has driven a number of sort of design considerations on our side. So if I go from firstly the tech type of answer, we have massively increased our communications with our residents, and that in itself is when you're in the full lockdown period, isolated into your apartment, actually it can feel quite lonely. So communicating any which way, whether it's in a phone call, whether it's an online communication through our portal or any other way, just make sure they feel like we care. And actually, if you look at some of the outputs coming out from any survey, other ones we do or people like HomeViews do, safety and security has come up pretty high amongst the build-to-rent sector, because that communication and caring landlord has come out pretty strongly. But going back to sort of non-tech type aspects, the working at home means if we've had to think much harder about design of the apartments. Now that's not an overnight job, but what we can do and are doing is our amenity spaces, which are wide and varied, and where people are working at home, where you'll have your breakfast, lunch, dinner on the table and work at the same time. There's actually need and desire to get out of the apartment. There's a bit of the coffee shop type atmosphere. People want a bit of a buzz and vibe around them, subject to social distancing. So we're looking at modifying a number of our amenity spaces to make sure one is fit for purpose, but very basic things like chairs and tables and the noise levels, partitioning, etc. are fit for purpose, because we want our residents to come out and use these spaces rather than them lie empty. So that's a lot of work we are actively doing at the moment. We are then also looking furthermore into more specific work at home areas. So if you again live in a smaller apartment, or if you're a couple of both of you are working at home, or if you have your own business and need space and privacy, so we're looking at even more private spaces to give people access to an environment. And this is literally not a short-term thing. Medium, long-term, this is going to be more and more so the case. There'll be a massive blurring between home and work in a physical sense, as well as in the past your phone being available means you're in contact 24/7. It's also physically how you work as well will be blurred completely.
I guess that sort of leads me on to the next question. I'd love to pick your brains over. Is there, I guess, if we're looking at sort of predictions for the future, sort of build to rent, where do you sort of see changes? Is it sort of further advancement in tech? Is it change to leases, whether it's how long they are? Is it change what tenants are looking for? Is there anything which you'd like to sort of share with us?
It's a very hard question. It's like a crystal ball question. I know.
Exactly. It makes it quite fun.
So I think you can look at this in a few different ways. As a sector grows, now we survey, as do many people, renters on a regular basis, and the awareness of build-to-rent as a sector and offering is gradually growing, but still a long way to go. And as a sector, it's still very small in relation to the whole private rented sector. So one of the things I can see growing very quickly is how build-to-rent gets much better recognized and understood by renters, which will then translate further into the brands themselves. So if you go into, what's a good example, in the hotel world, where you might go and stay one night or a few nights, the brand means a lot to most people, even though you're doing this, only 2 or 3 times a year. In the build-to-rent renting sector, you might live someplace 12 months and beyond, and yet traditionally, this sector hasn't existed. But I think going forward, the brands will start meaning something to individuals. But with the sector growing at the pace it is at the moment, I think the most important thing to me is the massive increase in choice for the customer, whether it's location to live at, in the style of the building, the product itself, the service provisioning you get with that, the price point itself. So that's one of the big changes coming. Also, as the sector matures, where most of us in the UK have sort of grown in the build-to-rent sector, have grown independently, have set up our own processes and systems, I think what we will start getting rapidly now is standardization. And there's already a lot of communication across the business. We all talk to each other as peers. But things such as lease terms, operating protocols, recruitment and training, which touched on before, I think that will start getting more standardized. So, from an employee's perspective, there's a lot more choice. You can seamlessly move from one to the other, but also about how a customer gets standardization coming through. But probably the most radical thing I can see, which most people now are just touching on, is how data is going to be used. And I think we're probably all of us at the forefront, so that we're all collecting it in different ways in different systems, but very few of us are making proper use of it. So as an example, we moved and developed our own customer CRM system through Salesforce a couple of years ago, and we're capturing a lot of data. But it's really now we're starting to really get into the depth of what this data is telling us. And it's really about how our customers living, what's important to them, how our building is performing, how we are operating. The better we understand these things, and we will start building and continue building better and better products. But ultimately, the success with the data is really, are we improving, enhancing the customer sort of enjoyment and benefits?
Yeah, every single podcast I've done so far, we all, at the end of the podcast, we all go back to the importance of data and how we're using it and cleaning it. And it makes me shudder to think that data is literally on so many different CRM systems, and how do you sort of merge them together to make it most efficient? But we're getting there. Everyone's recognizing the importance of it. I guess, Rajesh, outside of investment, build to rent, sort of development, if you hadn't gone into this space, is there any other industry or career path you would have gone into?
Oh, that's such a difficult one to answer. So
I love, out of all these questions, this is the most difficult.
I think you may have heard earlier, I'm a big fan of startups, fintech, proptech, any other sort of customer-driven startup. So if I was, not where I am at the moment, I started up being at Quintain for 12 years and loving every minute of it. I would love to spend time or dedicate time to startups, and I love to see them nurture and grow. And usually there's a sort of key person, the guy whose idea first come about, who has a great vision, and really how do we support and supplement that person to grow their business. So that would be even today a great sort of alternative to what I'm doing at the moment. And if I'm being slightly crazy, and the fact that I do love a challenge, I like lots of change. And what I'm about to say may sound really stupid, but the retail sector at the moment is going through amazing amount of pain. But the fact that, retail remains a really key driver. Everyone needs to purchase whatever they need to run and live their lives. The whole massive impact of COVID, massive impact of going online. There's so much change and transformation going in there. So that would be today maybe a crazy idea and a possible challenge. I'm not saying I'm definitely looking at that or indeed even considering it, but it could be something wild and wacky like that as an alternative.
Yeah, well, it's never too late, but Jess, there's always time to pursue new paths. Okay, awesome. Well, look, I guess this is bringing us to the end of the show, but before we go, is there anything you'd like to share with our audience and listeners, the best way for them to connect with you, Quintain, TP, or to find out any sort of information?
Just probably the main thing I would say is the whole sector, industry, build trend. It's a massively growing opportunity for anyone in any which shape and form you might want to be involved in it. So there's, whether you are creating a new product or service, whether you want to work within the sector, a designer, architect, whatever you happen to be, it's a sector to take seriously. It's growing rapidly now, but every underlying fundamental statistic, whether it's demographic or economics or whatever, is showing it, this will continue growing going forward. So it's a huge opportunity. So welcome anyone who wants to find out more. And if you do want to contact me, my email is rajesh@tp.london. Feel free to drop me an email. If I can't answer it, I will put you in touch with one of my many colleagues at TP or Quintain.
Awesome. And yeah, I guess if you're a startup, you now know Rajesh's weak spot. So no hounding. No, thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Rajesh, and we will catch up soon.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Propcast, and a big thanks to our special guests. Make sure you visit our website, www.lmre.co.uk, where you can subscribe to our show, or you'll find us on iTunes and Spotify, where all good content is found. Whilst you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate if you could rate and review us on iTunes, or if you simply just spread the word. Be sure to tune in next Tuesday, and I'll catch you later.
You're listening to a Podcast Company podcast. This was made by Podcast Syndicator, where we help you go from start to grow to making money with your podcast. Let us help you share your message and your voice with the world. Reach out now, Jason at podcastsyndicator.com or Brett at podcastsyndicator.com to find out more. Thank you for listening, and do come back to hear nothing but the best podcasts.